good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're joining across the world. I have an illustrious panel today. Let me start by introducing my panel members. We have Mr. Ramesh, MD and founder of Kaynes Technologies, Mr. Gireesh, Rajendran, the CEO and co-founder of Steradian, and we have Mr. Ankit Mehta, his co-founder and CEO of IdeaForge Technologies. Welcome all my panelists, and let me start with just. Do we have Ankit here? Let me start by introducing my panelists with just one or two lines of introduction. Mr. Ramesh, he has been a pioneer and he has founded Kaynes Technologies in 1988, soon after his graduation. It's one of the first EMS companies in India to be certified by ISO 9000 certificate. That's a huge initiative, Mr. Ramesh. And Kaynes has been not only serving marquee Indian customers, but also the 30% of their revenue comes from exports. It's a privilege to have you on the panel, Mr. Ramesh.
Thank you.
We have Gireesh. He is the founder and CEO of Steradian. It's a RF semiconductor startup that licenses and makes imaging radars. Multimeter wave imaging radar in 28 nanometer CMOS. It's predominantly for the automotive use cases. And Gireesh himself is an accomplished product architect in the RF semiconductor space. His expertise spans from GPS, LTE, and now in radar. He has been awarded the Innovator Under 30 by MIT. Thank you, Mr. Gireesh, for joining the panel.
Thanks, Vinay. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and then we have one of the well-known CEOs in India, Mr. Ankit Mehta. His company, IdeaForge, they manufacture micro and mini vertical takeoff and landing UAVs. Their drones have multiple use cases, both defense and enterprise, but they have about 90% market share in defense and homeland security UAV segment in India. Ankit Mehta is also named as the top 50 innovative leaders by the World Innovation Congress, and he is the top 35 entrepreneurs under the age of 35 in India. Thank you, Ankit, for joining the discussion today. Welcome. I would like to start today's discussion with a question to Ankit. Ankit, as you know, right, and you would also agree that India has a large engineering base, a very good set of incentives from the government of India, and you have 90% market share with defense and homeland security. So you work with government agencies closely. And there's also a huge demand. It's a demand market, right? So in spite of having all these factors, why are there very few hardware startups, very far and few, right, in the Indian domain? What do you think are the attributes, and what do you attribute this whole thing?
So, Vinay is not Australia. Those are the early markets. New Zealand is also one of the early adopters of technology. So, nothing in that one sense in India goes viral, right? So, it's not like there are too many hardware startups who have launched something and they've gone viral to the extent that they've scaled, like maybe Jawbone scaled, or some of the other products that you must have seen, GoPro, or some of the other success stories. So on the consumer side, we don't have that kind of a market. And we are a very price conscious market rather than a value conscious market in that one sense. So therefore, companies that are making consumer products for India or even enterprise products for India, it's a very, it takes a lot of time to actually establish yourself, to get the ability to scale in this, if you're serving this market. And if you're serving other markets, then you need to show deep expertise of serving, understanding the customers in those markets and serving those markets. So it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. So that is one issue. The other issue is that even if somebody has a great idea, there isn't a lot of capital chasing hardware because one, there is always a constant fear of copying that exists. The other fear is that actually it's not a fear, but most of the investors don't understand hardware space. They don't understand the cycles in hardware. They don't want to get into that domain when they have a significantly easier scale up model on the other side of the town, which is the whole software and consumer software space. So those are some of the things which I feel end up being a problem. So typical hardware companies are not addressing that larger market within the country, or it's not clear that the market is as large. So that is again a dissuading factor. So sustainable competitive advantages, constant fear of competition from China, and some of the other issues hold a lot of capital back, as well as a lot of startups are not addressing. And also I think there is a problem in our Indian community, which is that Indian startup community, a lot of Me Too happens, right? I mean, there are a few drone startups, but there are 100 drone startups now doing the exact same thing. So it is pretty similar to what is happening in several places. So there's so much Me Too. It's kind of hard to create some success stories of that. And there's a constant fear in others who are looking to invest, or even in the community in that one sense.
So I mean, is it basically you are saying that in India the major buyer for high tech industry is B2B, mostly government or the very large corporations, and the cost advantage is considered to be one of the primary factors, and that's where it would normally go to China. And probably now in the change scenario, there could be a change in this. Do you agree? Or I mean, in terms of China shifting a lot of manufacturing.
There is a huge, yes, I do agree.
Okay, and I
do agree. There is a huge mindset shift. Organizations who won't care about whether it's a Chinese product or not, despite having national security at stake, are today saying that we don't want to buy anything of Chinese origin. So there is a huge difference in terms of mindset now.
Yeah, I mean,
and in this last 1 year has been transformative, I think, for the overall hardware technology ecosystem, or even the defense ecosystem from that standpoint. It's the best time to actually capitalize on that change in mindset. It is today, if there is any good time.
Exactly, like how this COVID has helped reimagine the next for many industries, and there has been a silver lining for EdTech, right? Similarly, I feel manufacturing and hardware, it's a silver lining, because Indian both manufacturing and startups are going to benefit from that. But yeah, it has always been a complaint from the product makers. The lead times are very high, Mr. Ramesh. Actually, there have been for when they make products like the hardware products, it could be enclosures or boards. It takes a long time in India, whereas it can be achieved in China or Taiwan at a much lesser time. So, what do you think? Do you agree? And then, what do you think are the reasons for this, and how this can be mitigated, or what are players doing for this particular problem?
Thank you, Vinay. First of all, I would like briefly to say how the connected devices have now become a reality.
Okay.
Then I'm sure my answers to your question also will come. We at Kaynes have involved in many manufacturing projects for large-scale connected devices. Our solution spans different technologies for areas including remote device management, mobile, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cloud. We have developed expertise in device design, solutioning, engineering, and manufacturing service in these areas. Now, to your question about how we can shorten lead time to market, there are several actions that come to my mind. Early engagement is one solution with products, and solution owners will go a long way in cutting down total time to market by ensuring advanced action and smooth handoff from design to proto to pilot to series manufacturing. This will also help in identifying early on any changes to bill of material that can be made sourcing of components more effective. That means we have to get engaged with the design house at the early stage itself, so that the lead times and all these can be addressed. And if you anyway know the silicon will not change, so we can start ordering the silicon and things like that. Manufacturing companies must employ good hardware engineers who not only know manufacturing but also trained in troubleshooting and build up knowledge and understanding in troubleshooting of electronic circuits. Design for manufacturability, design for assembly, and for testing. Concepts can be used so as to ensure first time right manufacturing to avoid multiple spin of PCBs, which takes time.
Right.
In terms of manufacturing lead times, the tooling development and custom built parts need special focus, and early action will greatly reduce the lead time. What we need to do is use the modern tools and make sure the project is managed well, so that the tooling and all these additional enclosure activities are all planned well in time. This is what my view is.
No, excellent. Actually, so if I summarize, basically you're saying early engagement of EMS companies with the design houses, right? So that you can predict and plan the project better. Second one is hiring the right talent from the manufacturing side, and largely manage the components well, right? So, for example, the main semiconductor would not change, but then the other components can always be chosen in such a way that their procurement can be managed well, right? So that kind of
Exactly.
That's really insightful. Actually, so it comes to the semiconductor side. So Gireesh, you coming from the semiconductor background, right? So what do you think the semiconductor guys can actually do? Like, I know large companies like Qualcomm or Intel have been playing a major role. They have a different a big team supporting all these startups, curating, nurturing deep tech startups, right? But then I think this kind of initiative will get them access to SDKs, the software part of the tools, but not that kind of tools that Mr. Ramesh suggested, right? So what do you think? Do you think startups should align with the semiconductor companies early on? Are there any pros and cons to this? What are your thoughts on this? You coming from semiconductor background, your insights would be really helpful.
Yeah. See, yes, you rightly said, semiconductor companies, the established ones today, they are seeking hardware startups, mainly those who can find new markets for their IC portfolio, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's good news. Like Qualcomm funding startups that can develop products around, say, their Snapdragon chipsets, or NVIDIA around their GPUs. So that is a good part. Now, coming to your question, in my experience, one of the biggest bottleneck for hardware startups today, that's a path from proof of concept to a reliable finished product. Okay. Now, the infrastructure that is needed, including the testing, the lab, qualification, and so on, for the latest technology. Like if I take our case, a millimeter wave imaging radar, right? These are pretty much almost absent or very hard to access. And these are, of course, capital intensive and is a long-term investment. So something that most of the startups may not be able to handle on their own.
So, you see that. So, do you work with any of the startups for your own use cases? Do you help them? How do you basically? I understand that there's, in fact, even in the earlier call, discussion that we were having, this was one of the points, right? Like the labs, we don't have sufficient labs for the startups where they can work on an hourly basis or something like that. So, how do you see this solving for the Indian ecosystem? What is your recommendation, maybe for the government or for the large companies?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, one option to answer your first question. Yeah, we do engage with other startups, correct? But then that also is good to get to a stage where it reaches a proof of concept, right? But not to a finished product. So that is because even they do not have the wherewithal for a testing facility or a qualification lab. Of course, maybe for an older technology that is already there, but not when you are looking at the latest technology. And one option, of course, is to partner with an established company early on in your product cycle, right? That is something we have tried. But then, of course, it comes with its own limitation, right? It may not be possible in every scenario. And if you ask me what is the solution, yeah, since it requires quite a bit of capital, which is like a long-term investment, yeah, this has to come, some part has to come through some like a bigger scheme, right? Through between government and bigger players. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ramesh, do you want to add to this, like in terms of the certification labs, or do you see what is the role government can play or larger companies can play, and do you see anything happening on that side?
On this subject, if you see, India has come out with cluster,
That's right.
okay, models for the test labs. In Mysore, we have now done all EMS companies along with some product companies all have put in some small stakes, and then government has put in a larger stake. So we are coming out with a lab, test lab. But then this is a big subject. All of us should not do the same test labs or vibration tests, this, that. We should have specific labs for certain specific subjects, which government is not controlling. Already, if there is a lab, somebody else wants to come and visit this lab, wants to put the same facility in another state. That may not be a good idea.
Right.
But government's initiative is good, provided we all take it in the right ways. We all don't repeat the same in every.
So you basically are saying that the initiatives and intentions are good, but then there needs to be more planning and less dedication of and resources, right? So
Yes.
Ankit, I mean, this is something that will definitely be of interest to you, right? So, for example, you have really taken your product from concept to deployment. You've got market share. So, in hindsight, if you have to look at it, and also you being a CEO as well as a product guy, you would always have this breadth versus depth kind of a constant debate going on, right, in your company also. So in hindsight, what would you do differently that would have either reduced your lead times or it would have helped you reach the scale early with IdeaForge? Yeah.
So lead times, honestly, a lot of times you've made mistakes around, not judging the vendor's capability early on, especially, some of the local vendors that we engaged, and we ended up wasting a lot of time in iterating on the same things or correcting the mistakes that were ab initio made. Like the problem, like something very simple like molding in India is a nightmare. They don't know how to make great molds. They'll try and make good molds by using manual processes, and a lot of issues are there. So I would say that investing at the right time in the right vendors, I think, is really important. That is something which I would have done significantly better, done more scrutiny in terms of the processes that they are going to pursue. A lot of times we relied on the vendor to know their stuff, but you end up needing to handle tremendously in the end to make a meaningful outcome happen, or just to save the investment. Half the time it was more like, let's at least save this investment, rather than actually getting something you're super satisfied with. So that's one of the problems in India, that ab initio basics of engineering are not utilized, and a lot of times the vendor is not actually an engineering first kind of a shop. So those challenges exist in India, and I would do significantly better on that side. Having said that, you rely a lot on testing, honestly, and you rely a lot on rigorously making sure that your product goes through enough amount of testing that it doesn't suffer obvious consequences in the field. So I think that is something which is super critical, and we have to take a lot of care of that.
Yeah, so when you say testing, actually reminds me of the scale, right? The scale problem that we are addressing in this panel. Like that would definitely affect the scale. Like even if the POC is successful, limited trials are successful, the moment you hit onto the scale, you get on with some design issues, then which takes you back to the drawing table. Has that happened? And or maybe you have heard something like that. And what are your experiences with that? Maybe if you share this, there are a lot of entrepreneurs today in this session that will help them.
So one pitfall that happens often enough is end of life.
Mhm.
So even if a failure is not happening, your scale gets limited by surprise end of lives. In fact,
That is true.
the entire automotive industry is going through an electronic component shortage right now, and it is so severe that lead times of some of the critical components is close to a year out. So, imagine what would happen to all of those companies. Like, despite all your best efforts and having the right products of the biggest companies out there, you still have such surprises and challenges in supply chain and scale. So, I think it's a part and parcel. Honestly, if somebody asks me what are your biggest challenges, they keep coming round and round. Like there is no one big challenge. Like there is one you solve, and the next one becomes big enough for you to get scared, and then the next one becomes big enough. So business, I would say, is like that, and it is a huge problem. End of life and not keeping a track of that can be a huge problem.
Not true. In fact, in my own experience, when we were building a product, or when we are actually building a product, the USB connector was one of the big problems. The USB Type C connector. There's absolute shortage of that during these times, 6 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, Ramesh, if you in our earlier discussions also, right, you also mentioned that not accounting for support, sales, and services, usually which are overlooked by entrepreneurs during the growth phase, that actually comes to bite them back. So, what do you want to emphasize on that, or you want to give some examples for us on that?
See, any product when we are going in for manufacturing, after sales support is very, very important. That is why I was mentioning that early engagement. When we have an early engagement, before we take a contract, we should make sure, as Mr. Ankit was telling, the selection of vendor is very important. Be EMS at our sub-selection also is very important. So if we miss these points, what happens is the product becomes a big problem when challenge comes when we have to take it for manufacturing. So my opinion, if we can walk through a good process for selection of sub vendors like tooling, like sheet metal parts, finish. So early understanding of the end product is very, very critical here.
Right. I mean, yeah.
So you make sure your vendor can meet your end specs. Then
Okay.
there is no confusion all through. When it comes to after sales service also, where the products are, in fact, in some places where products are launched in big numbers, it is better to have a person in the initial days till they are all smooth and running.
Yeah, actually, I mean, do you think, I mean, for example, that kind of demands a lot of depth from the product manager or basically the CEO of the product, right? Like, because it is not only it is a lot of depth and a wide breadth. That is a challenge, right? Because in order to choose the right vendor, also you need to know what are the issues, and unless you
Vinay,
go.
unless we work like that, it is every time it is going to go back to China and say how they are doing it. They have mastered the art by now.
Right. So you have
We,
to
we
go
need to we need to patiently wait to reach there.
That's right. In fact, once Naren Murthy told that one generation has to sacrifice so that the other generations can lead a much better life in India.
It is very true.
Right. So it's something like that. One generation of entrepreneurs have to make these mistakes so that the rest of them can learn from them. Right. So. In fact, that brings to another very interesting question to Gireesh. Like, so as connected devices are increasing, then we probably move from 4G to 5G soon, right? So what are the when you're saying scaling, it is one is about the product deployment, right? What are the other scaling challenges that you see from the 5G perspective or from the RF perspective that we don't normally that you want to advise an entrepreneur, right, on the when they're looking at something like a smart city IoT product? What kind of challenges do you want to advise them to be aware of?
This would be very much linked to what I said earlier. Looking at looking at it as an end product, a finished product which is highly reliable, right? That is the most critical part, and that is where we kind of lack the expertise as of today, right? That is something we have to develop, and we are going to face this as we go into deployment of all these new devices.
Yeah, I mean, do you this semiconductor, like, the end of life, MOQ, and compatible components, and then there are the dependent components like PIMX and so many other things, right? So what is your suggestion? I mean, this came to my earlier question again, that is it good for a startup not just to engage with the end user, but also align themselves to a particular semiconductor house early on, so that all of these are sorted out? But then that would make their solution very tied to a particular semiconductor house. So what would be your
partnering with established players, that I would suggest is a what you call a good direction. That is something, as I mentioned, we have also taken, right? Because there are a lot of things you need to learn to go from a proof of concept to a finished product, and trying to learn that all over again, right, is not the most efficient use of your resources. So you should partner any startup. To any startup, that would be my advice. Try to partner with an established player early on in the cycle, right? Of course, there will be some drawbacks, but then as long as you draft the agreements in the way that you are not tied to one company or one vendor or one customer, that is.
Ankit, what do you think about this? I mean, I'm going to pose this question to all the three of you, right? So, what do you think are the pros and cons of startup as aligning to a particular semiconductor house early on? Because that kind of smoothens their logistics, probably mistakes. They may even get a reference design, but they may also be. I mean, you know, right? Like moving from Qualcomm to Nvidia to Intel would have challenge going forward. So, what is your take on this?
So, honestly, I personally believe that, at the macro scale, one should not tie, a particular technology is not something to be tied to. Your customer is what you need to tie to. If the technology that you're using can service your customer for the long term, then you can remain tied to without compromising the customer experience. But beyond a point, you can be tied to, but if, things are not keeping pace, then you have to look at all possible alternatives in order to service the customer. So for me, the customer needs are paramount, and if we can continue servicing the customer needs in an effective manner without becoming uncompetitive ourselves, then we continue to ride the bus and create an environment where we are succeeding together. But if we are not able to do that, then and there are a lot of times where you are lagging or you're leading, including a semiconductor house. So it entirely depends on where you are in your customer journey and whether the customer journey is able to, will your customer journey will survive that, lead or lag. So I personally feel that it's a question of, and then it's a question of your ability as well. Can you switch fast enough? Can you be agile enough in making sure that you're able to adapt to the customer's needs? So sometimes you may have to live with it because, the cost of change is so high that it's almost not viable to do it at this stage unless you want to start from scratch. So there are a lot of considerations. So I won't say there is a right answer to this, but you have to keep gauging and you have to make sure that you don't lose out in the long run because you don't have control over so many other things. on the other side, right? So you're not defining their roadmap. If you're
Exactly.
defining their roadmap and they're able to keep pace with it, then there is no problem at all, right?
Yeah, but that'll be a huge ask. For a startup, right?
For a small company, it's kind of very challenging. So that's where I feel that you have to put your customer first and see if you can remain agile. If you can't, then you eventually don't have any option as well to continue with what you have and optimize whatever you have to the best possible extent.
Yeah, Mr. Ramesh, what do you think? What do you
I agree with Ankit because our customer decides which route we should take.
Mm.
In case the customer's products calls for various applications, more or less every semiconductor company is now into a reference design model. Tech support also they give. So it is more focused from a customer's point of view than from a technology availability point of view.
Okay.
So what is important here is the startup has to align with the customer, select the right semiconductor partner which meets all the QCD, cost, delivery, quality, all aspects. When I say quality, is the technical support and things like that, reference model, design, everything, which can bring down the lead time of the development of the product. When it comes to delivery, they should study these chipsets, what is the delivery availability, all those things. Otherwise, the product will be out at that time. When it comes to rolling out, they will be again stuck there.
Yeah, in fact, there is the question which raises sort of this, like, if you're not tying up initially, then you'll spend a lot of time, money, initially learning all the things on your own, right? And you cannot actually focus on the design or customer, basically meeting the customer requirements. But then now that we were talking about IoT and hardware products, would what will be the impact of this 5G coming in? Will there be new use cases that you see that startups can concentrate on? A drone being at a cusp of many domains, right? Like, for example, it is on the security, then agri-tech, and smart cities. So, Ankit, where do you see a lot of tractions? Any insights into that?
Yeah, I think 5G. So honestly, while we do feel that a lot of 5G is going to roll out, a lot of it depends on at what height is it, at what max height will it be available. So for a drone, a lot of applications will get limited based on the max height that the signal is available at. But what 5G will enable is significantly lower latencies on your ability to see what the drone is seeing,
Right.
and to take to entirely remotely be able to operate the system, as compared to the need for today for a pilot to be there and to take sort of an instantaneous control, and the lag on the internet is digestible for the operations. So a lot of those use cases will come up with 5G, where latency will cut and you will be able to transmit very high quality imagery back to the command and control centers or to the base stations or to the cloud, and make sure that your analytics can be pushed out faster depending on the kind of compute you've put behind the analytics. So I do feel that it can change a little bit of the scenario, especially in the urban environments where the density of the network is very high. But in remote areas, it will have impact probably of being able to still manage compute on cloud for particular processing applications like mapping and all, as long as the upload can be much faster than your ability to compute on the edge. A lot of times, the upload itself can be so taxing that compute on edge will match up to the overall cost. So it's kind of penetration will also determine a lot of use cases opening up and panning out.
Yeah, we just have about another 2.5 minutes. I would want to give a minute each to Ramesh and Gireesh. Gireesh, what is your roadmap for the company? And if you can just tell about
Yeah, so we focus on the what you call in future. There will be data generators and consumers. We focus on the data generation part through the help of newer and newer sensors. So that part of it we are also into. we help generate a lot more new type of data where it was 2D data today. Yeah, we help to convert to maybe 3D data. Right?
3D and 4D imaging. Yeah, Mr. Ramesh.
We at Kaynes Technology are very excited with this 5G coming in. I'm sure some of the examples like deployment of our asset location and management, then on our ODC development centers getting developed, then we are into energy meter connectivity sectors. So these connectivities, the business is really going to grow. So I'm sure smart, whatever we have talked all these years should come in the days to come in, maybe in the next 2-3 years.
So do you
So
see
we are,
the cost of 5G devices to be coming down? I mean, as of now, it's quite high, but then would it be coming
it is
down?
definitely going to come down. Otherwise, this connectivity business will not grow. But we have seen how the telecom networking business has come down. So in the past, I'm sure we'll be there.
Ankit, yeah, you have a few seconds. You want to talk about the roadmap and.
Yeah, I think broadly, we'll be the consumers of this technology. So we hope that network laying costs and the cost of taking data over that network is significantly cheaper for us to be able to enable this for all of our users, because running cost is a huge factor ultimately. So hopefully it'll be even cheaper than 4G data that we experience today. And if that happens, then I'm sure that a large spectrum of use cases can be opened up for 5G, and especially in a data-heavy setup like ours, where you're generating every instance of the drone up in the air, you're generating very, very high resolution imagery, and the GBs of data is generated in a few minutes. So in those scenarios, we'll see great impact, especially with the 5G technology coming in.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so this brings us to the end of the session. Thanks all the three gentlemen to join on this panel, and it was a very insightful discussion. Thank you.